There we go.
Awesome. Okay, plan weekly meeting, 24th of November for most people, I think. Cool. Who's got the first item? Martin?
Hi, this is going to be weird. My computer is not recognizing my external camera, so I'm going to be looking here while reading from here. Um, so I finally got to looking at a doc page that lists everything that appears on an issue, all the different parts, and the team has long decided to get rid of it because it's just technical debt, you know, piles of tech debt with the screenshot and numbers. So I'm moving out different things to specific pages. And I found a thing that said that you can send an email to an issue, that there's a button visible to guest users, and I couldn't find it in GDK. So I started a Slack thread in the plan channel, and Alex suggested to try in a private project. Still doesn't appear. So does anyone remember removing it, or you know, or anything? If not, we can move on and then let me know if you remember anything.
We made I'm trying to remember, and I can try to find it. We made a change to those email addresses. I think.
Because the permission doc says that guests can create comments on issues, so must have been changed, I guess.
I think for the email though to show up, the service desk should be enabled because that's why you'd have the email. Like I don't know for sure, but I can take a look afterwards.
Sure. So just sharing this with everyone. And then is John.
No, but I think without service desk, like it should still work, right? There's an incoming email address for every issue that allows you to email a comment. Am I
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, like the issue, it's titled issue email, and then you have kind of the project name appended to with. Let's see. Trying to find an issue to use in as example. I'll dig into and I'll try to find the change we made to see if it would have caused this. I don't know. I just know that we made some changes to these issue email addresses within the last year. So I'll find that and see if it could be related. I don't think it would have removed anything, but I'll check.
All right, thanks. John?
Cool. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so something that's come up like it's top of mind for me at the minute is that, we're starting to plan separately as different groups. We may retrospect separately at some point as well. So I'm interested to know kind of what's coming up ahead, like 2, 3, 4 milestones ahead, and have a kind of continuous design process for that. So I identified 2 things that I think are probably most interesting to us on the product planning side. And yeah, the one that seems to be most pressing is GraphQL API for work items. I suppose like canonically, this belongs in project management, but my attitude would be like whoever needs the thing first should build the thing first. Same with parenting as well, because you kind of create the first implementation and then the team that's responsible either maintains that or generalizes it or improves upon it. So there's a discussion there that I've opened, like an issue for discussion of this. The idea of the issue is to capture decisions around the design of an API for work items. I know we've like discussed it a little bit in the overall work items document, the engineering discussion. We've also touched on it in an MR, and Natalia, I think you designed some of it for like what the front end would expect from a work items API. And so because we're doing it in a few different places, I want to get it all in one place. And it seems from the discussion that's there already that both teams actually need this within a matter of a couple of milestones. So in order to produce tasks, we need a work items API. And in order to deprecate the requirements, the old type of requirements, not work item requirements, we need to have a work items API. So I suppose my question is like, does anyone see any problem with this? Any concerns about it? Any ideas for like who'd like to be involved or how we should go about designing it, or whether we should try to design it at all? Like, or just like iterate towards it?
My only point is like, whatever team owns the API for work items, please involve frontend really early and validate the whatever we have from the schema early with the frontend as well, because it's just easier to iterate on our own work.
It seems like we could start with the requirements of the front end, of our own front end client. But we'd like to design the API from the point of view that it's a product on its own, that people outside, we're building it as an API, and whatever we build, especially in GraphQL, it's very costly to change. So we want to build something we can maintain. And if that means building it more slowly, then that's fine. Yeah, I can't think of the other thing I was thinking was that like maybe we should take the attitude that no matter what reason we're building it for, we build everything to be generalizable for all work items. So if you're building descriptions, a descriptions widget for task work items, you should build it for all work items and so on.
Yeah. So John, I guess like the comment I put there and rereading it now, it's not super clear what I was talking about, but I was thinking like with the we know on the project management side we have to approach doing tasks, and we know like the prototype that Natalia has showed off includes like create work item mutation that we will need to create a task, right? And so like kind of a bare bones like minimum thing that we need to create a task. I guess what I was fearful of is that I didn't want to kind of jump the gun and create this thing and then not be considerate about the design of it, but we also need to do it. Is it a mistake, I guess, to sort of dive in and create work item mutation that effectively does the same thing as create issue but with fewer fields? Like, or do we need to sort of like step back a bit and kind of do a more like abstract design and then move into doing the concrete thing?
I would say
I'd like us to move into doing stuff, but the only concern that I have is we need to add documentation and also around the thing that some endpoint or some GraphQL thing is an alpha. So it's not recommended to being used by the customers, because otherwise we will be modifying this stuff a lot. We are adding, we don't exactly know how that will shape in the future. So that's really something that is usable for us to implement the UI around the work items and all that stuff. So it'll be nice to mark it as just don't use it, or something like an internal API that we can then make public at a point where we are certain that some things will not change as frequently as we know they will change right now. Because like, at least mine, I've been disconnected a bit from the work items, but I think we're still evaluating things. We're still discussing stuff. So it'll be nice if we can do something like that to just make the API do the changes that we need. Then we can switch and change however we want to, and at some point declare it as a released kind of thing.
I agree with Alexandru, and on top of this, one mutation is essentially doing the same. It's not returning the same, not in the same shape, at least, because we still want to stick to the widget architecture, and create issue mutation returns us an object. And we really want to have an array of widgets, and modifying create issue for this is like, it's not possible because we're consuming this mutation a lot in the current front end. So that's why having a standalone create work item would be really nice for both, I think, front end and back end to evolve and iterate, like Alexandra said.
So is there a reason why we can't just design it that way up front? Because so that's what I was thinking. But the thing about requirements is that they're so simple. The widgets are going to be a widget for title, a widget for description, things we can hard code in the first instance. What else? Like a widget for state that's slightly different from issue state, but it's otherwise pretty much identical. And the only one is like last test report state, which is pretty unique to requirements. But the thing is like that we need to send people, when we deprecate the requirements API, we need to send people somewhere, and we can't send them to an API a work items API that's in alpha and that's not stable. So I'm wondering, is there somewhere in between, like is there a stable first state of the API? Right? I mean, it seems like a two-way door because it's an array of widgets anyway. So you're not changing the schema. If we change that, you're just, you know, giving, but like adding or removing from an array.
I guess I agree that we have to point requirements users to work items endpoint. We cannot use anything else. But I am afraid that I agree with Alexandru and Natalia that we need to make this experimental from the beginning, because I suspect that even the widget schema may change. Although there seems to be agreement that how we would model it, it's still possible that the schema might change in when we implement first couple of items or first widget. So I'm not sure we can make it stable from the beginning.
Well, that's 3 engineers telling me no, so like, I'll take it. Mark, maybe we want to push out the deprecation of the requirements API and just forget about it for a while. Then we'll support it indefinitely for now.
Sounds like it. I think that's the plan. If you hear otherwise, then we revisit. But I think for now, it's best follow the lead of what people are saying here. So yeah, no, I'm good with that. Thanks, John.
I think we can deprecate the requirements API once we have the task in place and workable, if that makes sense, because this is what's going to allow us to test things to make it work. And then we will build the task API so that it supports multiple work item types. And then basically what that means is we will redirect the requirements API into this task, which is going to be work items API, right? The thing is that we cannot do it from the very beginning with the requirements. We cannot point it to the new API that we are developing because it's going to change a lot. So it's going to just break the requirements API, if that makes sense, right? So we need to maintain that old way of accessing the requirements for a little bit longer until we kind of are confident to release this and say, okay, from now on, we are going to maintain the way that we designed the work items API.
Do we need this issue anymore then? This discussion issue? Like, do you want to use it to keep everything to do with API design in one place, like the schema and the initial like create and view mutations, or create mutation and view query? Or do we not need it anymore and it's okay just to do everything in tasks, issues, and so on?
You mean for work items? They are closed. They are closed. Create feature work item, whatever. Like the first iteration is already merged, so we can definitely close 2 first issues. And I asked Gabe to create a specific new one for the task, at least for the view. Same, I believe, for create, because they just updated the old issues, and it's not really correct because we already implemented the code for these 2 issues. So I think for view a task, it's already cloned, but we also can create a new issue separately for create a task, not for work item, and implement it separately for backend and frontend, so we can start working on the real API finally.
But what are you going to use in the meantime before we get to the real API? Like, how would you create a task now if not creating
We
a work
already,
item?
we already have we will be creating work item. This is basically it, but we will probably need extend a bit of create work item mutation, because at least for the first designs for the task, we will need at least a description. Currently, we only have title, so just a little modification on our side. But essentially, we will be using the same create work item.
Do we have a backend mutation already? Because I didn't.
No,
Okay.
no.
This is what
This
I
issue. So I'll link somewhere. I have a create work item for tasks specific issue that
let's use that generic and then somehow note that this is going to be first for tasks, so that we don't have multiple issues. Like, can we? I don't know what the issue is, but let's call it GraphQL for work items or whatever, and then as a task, say first is going to be task work item type.
One note about the experimental API. Although I think that the API should be experimental, I didn't mean we should wait for tasks implementation, or I don't see a problem. I mean the proposal to start with implementing, we start using work items API for implementing requirements makes sense, or I'm not sure we have to put another roadblock of waiting for tasks widget, because it was already 2 years ago when we were there was supposed to be assignees widget or something like that. So I'm not sure we need to wait for something to be done. Maybe rather just communication or cooperation when we start modeling the API to make sure that it matches both tasks needs and requirement needs would be sufficient.
So that's why I created that issue that I've linked at the top. I thought it would be good to have the requirements for the specification in one place, so both teams could work off it. So, I mean, even if it's still experimental, but we know, for example, Natalia said there that we need an array of widgets. We don't want objects passed back. Then we should have that somewhere so that, like, regardless of who builds it first, we build it that way. It might not be the final thing, like, you know, the widgets themselves may change or whatever, but like it's decisions like that that we can point to like one place and say. So I don't know, like I can close this issue, but if it's still useful, I'd like to keep it open, just even to gather everything in one place, all the decisions.
So if we move the requirements to the work items API, we have to deprecate the old one. We have to basically remove it, not deprecate, right? Or can we use both?
Yeah, no, it's the other way around. Like we can't deprecate it until we have a stable API that we can send people to. And it takes 6 months after we deprecate it to like a minimum of 6 months to actually remove it. So I naively thought we could deprecate it in 14.6, but the earliest, well, if we deprecate it in 14.6, the earliest we could remove it would be 15.0.
So the problem that the thing that I want to understand is if we let both task and requirements use the new work items API and we do a breaking change, but like we mark this as experimental, we do a breaking change, that gets kind of released to the on-premise. There is no easy way to fix it, right? On .com, okay, we go and patch it. For on-premise, it's more difficult if we still keep the alternative of the old API for people to do their job, and they are aware that they are using an experimental one. So if that breaks, that's okay with them. Then yeah, we can pull in not only requirements but everything there. This is where like the problem is that once you make something basically public and disable the way that like you give them only one access point, right? That is experimental, that's not okay with me. But if we still keep the old one and we just moving everything to the new API, that's okay.
It's actually worse than that. Like if we ship the API and a front end that relies on it, and then we create a breaking change in the API and change the front end to match that change, we would create a multi-version compatibility issue because people have multiple nodes in their deployments, would roll out that change and would have errors because some nodes would have the new back end and some nodes would have the old front end and vice versa. And so you have to kind of roll it out like that all GraphQL changes are backwards compatible, at least with our own client. So yeah, like I said at the beginning, like GraphQL changes are extremely costly because they're not versioned. So yet, anyway.
Yeah, I wonder if we would have to remove the experimental flag or node when we remove or enable implementing this behind the feature flag, but as long as it's behind feature flag, then we can make any changes whatever we need. But perhaps we should settle on not experimental version of API when we enable this by default, I assume. And I guess that at that point we should have tasks or requirements widgets in quite a reasonable shape. So it should be clear whether the API is stable or not. Does this make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I'll let you summarize that one. Yeah. Oh, so, okay, so the verdict is maybe we keep this issue open for now, and maybe I'll try and pull in some of the discussion that's already gone on about the schema, Natalia, that you need for what you've built so far, and at least that can, at least if we have nothing else, we have that documented in this issue. Martin, yours is read only. Would you like to read it only?
Sure, but you're not allowed to comment. So yeah, so this is a scheduled reminder that apart from the docs style guide, we also have an A to Z word list, which is growing slowly and has guidelines about many specific things. So go have a scroll through it, and if you find something new, or you know, or you stop doing something you've been doing, or the other way around, let me know. So for example, one thing that is there is if you look for either reporter or maintainer, it has like a sentence that we want to use when we want to talk about the minimum permissions required. So we want to use the word role, like maintainer role, reporter role. But if you forget, just bookmark the page and, you know, you will be able to refer it. Okay, just kidding. You are allowed to comment. What is this, Jake?
It's a separate point.
Okay.
So if there's no comments on your, I'm still not sure if I can comment on what you said. I might be under threat of violence if I try to say anything.
There is no violence.
I actually, it just occurred to me that I talked to Alexandra about this before. I guess there's this effort to kind of classify how we use storage, object storage in GitLab. And there's a Google Doc linked in the top of that issue that should be available to everyone within GitLab that sort of categorizes this broad category of project and group uploads, which includes things like images or PDFs or random files, whatever, anything else dropped into a note or a description or a wiki page. And I talked through with Alexandra a little bit. They're not really like linked to the specific model. It's just that it becomes an upload. And then I think some of those, like things like the project avatars get stored in the file system, and then other things become, I think, LFS objects, or I'm not really sure if that's like, if it's an image and once it's in Git, if it becomes an LFS object, or if it can just live in Git otherwise. So I was just kind of gonna generally ask for help on this, especially have sort of a holiday through the end of the week. But Jan, mainly because you're here, and I know you've done a lot of work with how these things work. So I'm not entirely sure what the end goal is, more than just kind of having some general like classification of how these uploads are stored and uploaded. And to my knowledge, like the only way to do this is via attachment. Like it's either attachment to a note or attachment to a discussion. But yeah, if anyone has ideas or thoughts on that, be helpful.
Yeah, I will be happy to take a look after the call. One thing I remember where is the difference is that there is a difference whether you upload something as an attachment, for example, in a comment where it's handled as an upload, and there is a difference if you upload something as form data. In that case, it's handled by Rails server. Yeah. So there are two different ways how uploads are handled. I mean, typical uploads are handled by workhorse and uploaded directly to object storage. But if you pass something through form data, it's not covered by workhorse. And that's one of the difference I remember. But yeah, I'm happy to take a closer look at the issue.
Okay, cool. Thank you. And I'll try to document what I've already looked into as well.
I know this is coming, I think, from memory team, right? Maybe they, I don't think so, but maybe they try to build the file manager. I think GitLab, so they want to know.
Oh, maybe. Upload.
Would be nice to know. That would be a cool feature, I think.
I've got to go. I'll be right back. Sorry.
I think there's a working group around object storage. I think that's where it's coming from. I'm not sure what the intention is though. Yeah, I've got the handbook page here. I'll put it in the agenda. Cool. Sounds like that's us for today. I will stop the recording.